Tucker.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Karenann Tucker, and I am the CEO and board member at the Churchill Club. And our program this evening is called CIO Agenda 2010, What the Customer Wants. With us are Matt Carey of the Home Depot, Lars Rabbe of Strata Fusion Group, Karenann Terrell of Baxter, and Pete Solvik of Sigma Partners. Thank you all very much for being here. Now, Matt and Karenann flew in from Georgia and Illinois respectively, and we very much appreciate them flying in just for us. But the main person that we have to thank for tonight's program is Mr. Pete Solvik. He put the panel together, so thank you very much, Pete, for your help. And finally, one more big thank you to SAS for their generous sponsorship of this program. SAS is, as probably most of the people in this room know, a leading business analytics software and services company and the largest independent vendor in the business intelligence market. We're certainly grateful for their support and partnership, so please help me express our thanks. Briefly about our upcoming programs, in 2 weeks on Wednesday, May 20, we invite you to attend one of the Valley's most interesting and popular programs, the Top 10 Tech Trends Debate. Every year for 11 years, the Valley's luminaries stick their necks out and predict what's going to be hot in the year ahead. And it's always a lively evening with high audience participation. And a week later, on the 27th, we're going to do a wrap-up program. So for those of you who might not be able to make the big event, you'll still have an opportunity to dissect the trends and talk about them at the breakfast. And on the calendar for June, we have the Microsoft Chief Software Architect, Ray Ozzie. We have SAP's new CEO, Leo Apotheker. We have Good Wine, Good Company, the Wine Wide Web. And we also have a breakfast about the stimulus and the energy industry. We have so many great programs. Please do check our website often or make sure that you get on our mailing list so that you can keep up with what's coming through our calendar. A word about the club for those of you who might be less familiar with us. Now in our 24th year, the Churchill Club is the leading business and technology forum in the San Francisco Bay Area, presenting what's new, what's next, and what matters most. We are a nonprofit organization with 1,300 corporate members and 4,900 individual members, and you are welcome to take your rightful place as an insider and a proud Churchill Club member. You can find us at churchillclub.org or LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Now I'm very pleased to introduce our moderator, Pete Solvik. Pete is a successful venture capitalist for the past 7 years or so at Sigma Partners, and prior to that, Pete had a distinguished career in the IT industry. He spent 11 years at Apple during a period of rapid growth, where, among other things, he led their online services group, and then he played a number of key roles at Cisco Systems, including as CIO, and helped the company grow from $300 million to over $20 billion in annual sales run rate. He was named to the CIO 100 4 times by CIO Magazine, selected as one of the 25 most powerful executives in networking by Network World, and featured in 4 Harvard Business School case studies. He says he was lucky to join Apple in 1981 and Cisco in 1992, but not so lucky to have stayed at both for 10 years each. Now, Pete never started a company himself, but he told me that he feels blessed to be working with and helping entrepreneurs who have. We could not have done this program without you, Pete, and even if we could, it wouldn't have been half as much fun. So let's welcome Pete Solvik.
Thanks, Karen. We're going to start by having the panel members each introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the company they're at and their current breadth of responsibility and maybe a little anecdote about you personally, and then we'll start into the meat of the program. So we'll start with Matt.
Sure, I'm Matt Carey. I'm the Chief Information Officer at the Home Depot.
Been there all of 7 months so far, so I'm still green as it relates to Home Depot, but I spent 20 years at Wal-Mart and spent 3 years out here in the Valley recently with eBay. So pleasure to be here today. I appreciate the invitation and look forward to this. Little bit about myself. I got 2 kids, real small, 1 3, 1 1, both daughters in their full-time job. I'm glad I don't have that job, but I got part of the job. So anyway, glad to be here.
Lars?
I currently work for a consulting company here in the Valley called the Strata Fusion Group. It's a small partnership of ex-CIOs, and we do interim CIO and interim CTO work for companies across the Valley. Prior to that, I've been in the industry for about 35 years, and the last 10 years as CIO for companies such as Yahoo, Intuit, Redback, Octel here in the Valley, and have done a number of different industries and jobs throughout my career, always been in IT. On the personal side, I just ran my first marathon a little more than a month ago, so try to stay young.
Thank you. And Karenann?
I'm Karenann Terrell, and I'm the corporate CIO for Baxter International. Baxter is a diversified healthcare company. We do renal products, renal therapy, kidney dialysis, medication delivery, which is a lot of hospital supply goods if you've ever been in the hospital. Hopefully, your hospital is a customer of Baxter. And biotech, which is a rapidly expanding part of our business. I came to Baxter 3 years ago last week from Daimler Chrysler, so I dodged that bullet just in time in 2006. And I had been in the automotive business for about 20 years. With General Motors before Daimler Chrysler. So unlike my colleague who has a 1 and a 3-year-old, I have a 17-year-old getting ready to go to college, and I have been lamenting that I'm going to be an empty nester. I just have 1 child, and he has such a serious case of senioritis that I'm going to be glad to see him go another couple months.
I have one leaving too, and then senioritis, now I understand. It really is it's a communicable disease among seniors.
It is almost terminal, Pete.
So the first question is that I'm going to direct to Lars, actually to Karenann and Matt, and this is to talk about your current company and your current responsibility. The recession was far enough along in late 2008 that as you did a business plan for 2009 at the corporate level and at the IT level, you knew it was going to be a recession plan. And it was possible we'd get out of it this year, possible not. But clearly it isn't something that took us by surprise for 2009. We were into the recession, things were happening. So the question is, what were the company goals for 2009, realizing that it was going to be a recessionary year? And what were the IT goals to support those company goals? So what was IT doing to support the company? And then spending trends. Is it a consolidation year, a save money year, a invest because we think we'll be out of the recession by the end of the year? So just kind of an overview on as you went into 2009, your company plan and your IT plan. You want to start, Karenann?
Sure. I don't think that in late 2008, we really knew what was going to happen with healthcare. We're about 60% of our business model revenues outside the US. And so as healthcare, pharma, life sciences looked at what was going to happen ahead, it was very difficult beyond the impact of Obama, in fact, and his stated goals around after the election of what was going to happen. We made 2 very bold business decisions. I thought number 1 was we were going to plan to manage on the cost side in a never squander a crisis mentality of whether it hit us or not, Our thought was, as a healthcare provider, our DSO, our ability to recover cost from single payers in countries, et cetera, may be deeply impacted, but not the use of healthcare. People don't decide, oh, I think I'll have kidney failure next year. It really comes on you, and you have to go for it that year. So we thought there would be very serious pricing pressures coming from the health agenda, not just here, but across the world. So we made the bold move of pulling back spending in a way that really mimicked even before a crisis would come on, and we haven't seen it deeply impact our business because of the nature of what we do, to pull back spending much more aggressively, not to stop things, because clearly the revenue has stayed on track. So that was one fairly bold move, which has helped us significantly beat estimates of what's going on. But the other was that we decided to put into our plan the most aggressive ERP in the company's history at a global scale, in anticipation that our ability to grow the top line may in fact be impacted by what was going to go on in the world. The concept of our senior leadership team and our board was, let's move forward with plans for transformation for the company at the operational layer, not just finances and supply chain, but a lot of the customer service elements from a healthcare point of view. So that's what happened, and IT then on an up, down, or sideways is way up.
Spending's going up. And the key initiative is ERP.
It is ERP and transformational management of cost, which in the healthcare industry lagged a lot of other industries. For instance, automotive. Automotive already had, knew how to differentiate between core spending, non-core related elements. So it just moved that paradigm into Baxter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, certainly knowing that you can choose whether to go to Home Depot or not, unlike whether to go to the hospital or not.
Yeah,
probably a
that's true.
slightly different side of the coin.
Yeah, a little bit different. And coming out of the fall, we decided to close several stores, particularly our expo business, and exit that business, and really reduce the headcount significantly. We have a lot of jobs that we eliminated as a result of that. And so we've been very cautious into 2009. Again, not really knowing what was going to happen. A lot of things up in the air, and a lot of unknowns. And so what we decided to do was, cash is going to be king, or queen, as our CFO likes to say, Carol Tomei. And so, she did a great job of coaching us through conserving cash in 2009, was the battle plan. The other thing was, we're going to continue to invest in certain areas, specifically in our supply chain remodel. And so we began opening, or still are opening, regional distribution centers to kind of renew that supply chain, because that is a key element when this does turn around, that we'll be able to adapt much quicker. And also, we took the approach that says we're going to conserve by getting more efficient and figuring out how we can reduce costs in our business and manage costs in our business, and really go about figuring out how we simplify the tasks that happen at store level. And so, as you could well imagine, we came off of a project to implement ERP in our Canadian business, and we got that installed and up and running, and we then immediately shifted our focus to support the supply chain rollout, and then begin to help our stores with detasking those folks to be able to focus on selling to the customers and getting up our customer service and really investing in and protecting our payroll in the store so that we could serve our customers when they came in. And we felt that was kind of a point of differentiation between us and our competitors. And then the third thing was, okay, how do we begin to start looking for places where we could improve efficiency and cut costs in how we operate IT, but also, places where we weren't as efficient as we should be. And so that's kind of the undertaking that we've taken so far, and we're through Q1, but we've got several more things that we want to do in many of these areas. But that's kind of the approach that we've taken.
So for IT, I mean, certainly retail sales are down. From IT perspective, was this we're going to protect the IT budget and continue investing because it's core to our other initiatives? Was it, be kind of tight, or was it, no, everybody's got to cut and IT is not an exception?
We tightened up. I mean, we reduced our total capital expenditures as a company. We went to $1 billion overall. We stopped building, many new stores. It's a different approach than our competitors have taken. They're continuing to open stores at a faster rate than we are. And we think our conservative approach is the right thing to do. What we decided, though, was that we were going to not go for a big project, kind of big bang during this time frame. It's really a focus on how do we get singles. How do we hit some singles that are going to make a difference for our business in a short time frame and then during a tough time, so that we could get payback quickly.
Okay. Well, we're going to switch from kind of what you're thinking of internally and what's going on in your company and in IT organization internally to a very, very big trend that's been going on for some years, both here in Silicon Valley and around the globe, and that is IT vendor consolidation. Most recently around here, and one of the reasons I want to ask this at first is because Sun has been a very early, very successful, fast growth company in the Valley. Becoming part of Oracle it's kind of like, boy, another one. And there was BEA, PeopleSoft, and Siebel, and so it's been a huge consolidation. IBM's bought companies like Cognos and FileNet and PwC from a consulting perspective. SAP's bought Business Objects and smaller application companies. And one of the things I've heard is that CIOs are kind of tired of the maintenance checks they've got to write, and that these vendors are getting more and more powerful and kind of becoming running their business on these maintenance streams. Plus, there's all these legacy applications that they now own. Are they going to consolidate? Are they going to continue investing? Or are they just going to collect money over time? So why don't we start with you, Lars, as you consult to quite a few companies and been CIO of companies that have been customers of all these vendors. Consolidation, good for customers, bad for customers? What are the concerns?
So I would say, just as a matter of general opinion, I've been in favor of consolidation. I've been impressed by what Oracle has been doing with their acquisitions, and really think benefited from the fact that the vendor in this case took on the task of integrating products that I was already using and adding value for me by doing that. The later trend of now increasing the support maintenance substantially, actually I think has reversed that trend somewhat. I think a lot of companies are now looking at, now I don't want to have to depend on just one vendor for all my ERP and systems needs in general. I got to be able to have a two-vendor strategy and start bringing in some diversity in the environment, just for to have an alternative in general. Overall, I think that the consolidation that I've seen in the last 20 years, I certainly have benefited from as a CIO in general. I think that being able to have more strategic relationships and really have the deep relationships that where you can sit down with the vendor directly and actually lay out what it is that you want to do and depend on the vendor to help you in that is an advantage if the vendor actually picks up their side of it, which doesn't always happen.
At Home Depot and at eBay?
I'd tell you that in general, there's always concern when there's a lot of consolidation, partly because of the control that those vendors have, or suppliers, and also the way they behave. So if in the past their behavior was to every year give you a X% increase on your maintenance, even though you're not getting more value for the money, it was a challenge because it was always a fight or a negotiation, depending upon what you wanted to call it. Right.
Loud conversation.
Loud conversation. You know, if the behavior was different, it'd be a different story. I think it's the behavior is not. It hadn't been such that the experience was going to be a pleasant one when it all happened. So that's been my experience so far. I don't know. What do you guys think?
You know what? I'm not sure that I agree that there have been these fantastic benefits to the IT community from the consolidation. And that pretty much goes across the board. You know, we're going to fuse the world into we're going to do nothing except for, you know, apparently have an underlying architecture or infrastructure that's going to be the same now with Sun. I'm not sure that the improvement that they've made on the product with the speed that they've done is half of what the innovation would have come from individual models that are being driven by themselves. And that's what my observation is that consolidation has taken a pause as they integrate in the innovation cycle. And in products like Siebel, it's allowed Verticals on Demand, Salesforce.com, whatever you want to call it, to basically walk in and potentially disrupt that. Now that's fine, because that's a completely different sales model. Maybe it'll actually drive more innovation in the competition. But it hasn't necessarily unraveled any of the complexity that was there before, and now they're moving the price up as a gotcha. And I'm all for paying more money on an annuity when you're delivering more value. I just don't see it. It just hasn't got there yet for me. And the more consolidation, I think the more dangerous thing is that the continued appetite for consolidation may go gather in some of the early startups that could disrupt, and the innovation, instead of being imported, will just be sucked down and the big machine will keep going. That's my fear. I don't.
So one of the counters to consolidation and to paying more and more for maintenance is free, meaning open source. And of course, MySQL, which supports an open source database, had been owned by Sun. And now, if this is approved and goes through, suddenly Oracle's got, well, would you like this one for free or this one that we're going to charge for? I don't know, maybe they're not going to have the one for free. It's still going to be available, of course, because it's legally open source. So the question now, and you've got the same thing with Microsoft versus OpenOffice, which will be owned by Oracle, presumably. But there's many other open source products, whether they be application products or whether they be in about every area, from every level of the stack, from the operating system all the way up to many, many applications are now available open source. If you think about your buying for a year, being that you're bringing in new things, what percentage of it in fact is free? So maybe you're paying an open source company to maintain it or support it or consult for it, but is it much of your buying decision that is buying something that is open source, and are you doing it because it's less expensive, or is it, no, we're a Fortune 500 company, we really can't rely on that, that's not serious, they don't support it well, the ISVs don't run on it. So let's talk about open source and the impact in large enterprises.
Source is not a player in a regulated industry like healthcare. Because the FDA comes in and they say, I want to be able to actually track and manage change control and understand how it's going to be done. So even if you move into open source, somebody has to oversee and manage the change control elements, because it's just a really serious component of the aviation industry, of the healthcare industry, of the food industry. So the interesting thing for us is, so open source gets relegated into an area that's not regulated, like the commercial and sales side of things. And there hasn't been a lot of innovation necessarily there. Some of the more interesting innovations in open source would be into the core parts of our business, where we just aren't a participant. So it isn't going to help in the industry where I am.
How about if it's open source where a vendor supports it?
Yeah, so you move into that environment, and if you're going to do that and you're going to pay those revenues, why wouldn't you look at commercial source from a much more reputable, older, I put that in quotes, reputable, but more understood, no offense to anybody here, but we just wouldn't take the risk. If you're going to pay, go pay.
I'd tell you from our perspective, we're not afraid of open source. The challenge is if you have the skill sets to be able to deal with it. So, you can go great guns with open source. You don't have somebody to, unless you have a contract that with someone to support it, but still you have to kind of integrate it and adopt it, I guess is the best way to put it. If you don't have the skills to do that at a pretty low level, you're taking on a little risk. And in some cases, it's a great thing. It improves speed, to market and flexibility in a lot of ways. I'm not opposed to it at all. I think it's good in appropriate places where you do have skill sets deep enough to deal with it.
Lars, your last 20 years of your career has been in the Valley, and a lot of people would say that Valley companies are kind of maybe embrace risk sometimes. Do you think it's playing a bigger role here?
Definitely so. I mean, certainly, if I look at what we did at Yahoo, we were both a significant user of open source software in a bunch of different areas, as well as contributor in some of the key technologies at like Apache, PHP, MySQL, and so on. And it's absolutely true. We actually had people that were just focused on making sure that those products worked for us. But also, we did a significant amount of upgrades to the products ourselves and contributed that back to the open source community. And some of this was clearly a cost play that products, certainly the three I just mentioned, absolutely can do almost any job inside the enterprise that you needed to do. So there was not a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about can it actually, is it secure enough, is it going to perform well enough, and so on. And I see that in quite a lot of companies around the Valley here. There's definitely a desire to use open source and also to contribute back to the community.
Do you think it's going to spread beyond the Valley? Is it a trend that's beginning to catch on?
Well, I worked for Fidelity 15 years ago, and we actually were looking at using open source, and that is a somewhat regulated environment, but there was the willingness to take the risk. Now, Fidelity is not a typical financial institution, and certainly have done a lot of things differently, but I think it will definitely spread outside the Valley.
Let's turn to applications. In bringing in ERP systems, a lot of the idea is let's customize as little as possible. We're going to buy packages. We're going to rely on those vendors, even with vendor consolidation, to support those. Versus we're going to do a lot of internal development. We're going to do a lot of homegrown. You guys have very different businesses. Although you have ERP backbones, clearly there's a lot of other things going on in your company. So the role of packaged software versus custom software, and to the degree of packaged software, are you trying to move towards less customization or more customization?
You go first.
You want me to go first? Okay.
Yeah.
We kind of take it one decision at a time. In some places, we think it's appropriate to buy. In some places, we think it's a competitive advantage to build. And if it's strategic for us, we'll probably build it ourselves. If it's context, payroll's kind of been done the same way for a long time. Not really a lot of strategic value there for us in a lot of ways. as long as it's flexible and can deal with the volume and scale and size of what we're trying to run, you know, a package is a great application there. If you think about some of the other areas of our business, you know, it'd be a risk to have a package installed there because of the dependency that it creates and the cost that it creates in a lot of cases. But you know, we're kind of trying to take it, you know, one at a time.
We look at, in a way, we look at our invent, make, sell, which embodies an awful lot of our competitive advantage at Baxter, as a place where we're going to customize, and a lot of the back office, and there's a lot more things in the back office than just, you know, finance and HR for us when you look at it. It's the things that are not context related. They aren't going to really drive our earnings. They're not going to drive our discovery, our innovation, those types of things. It's a fairly large bucket. But even on the customization side, we had a CTO come in who said even customization needs to be driven off of common platforms. Build and invest in a set of common platforms that everybody's going to use, and you're going to build your innovation on top of that, so that it's not your favorite technology build. We just don't add more and more complexity. And if it comes to the day when we want to take that from a support point of view of the custom, it can go to somebody who's going to understand the underlying platform and just support the code. And I would say in the vision that we had, that 50% of everything that we did in IT, you know, minus the infrastructure stuff, but 50% of what we were going to do was going to be customized. I'd say today we probably are at about 30% of pulling 30 of the 50 off of platforms. And that was a huge change, because every technologist has got their favorite little thing that they're working on, and it forced the innovation and customization into knowing what the business needs and doing that. So but we still try to stay on the other 50% as vanilla as possible. I just know we're on a journey on vanilla.
So I think one of the things that I'm seeing more of sort of appreciation of the fact that you have to manage, when you implement packaged software, you have to manage the degree of customization. I mean, we all went wild at some point implementing Oracle or SAP and something like that, and really understanding what is the footprint of the package that you install and try to keep that clean. And I think this goes hand in hand with the trend to much more SaaS software, which really sort of forces the hand of the whole issue that you can't customize that to the degree that you can when you have it in-house. So you are in a situation where you can defend much easier not to go down that road. And then once you understand what that footprint is, and certainly there'll always be a certain degree of customized software inside almost any company, you can isolate and make sure that you can keep your ERP packages and so on an upgrade path, because that's really what it's all about in the end. And I'm seeing more appreciation for that now, and more trend towards that.
So SaaS is a good topic to move into. Regulated, very interesting in terms of whether you can even use SaaS, or if it's in a context area. You were talking about core versus context. Large enterprises, the biggest companies, SaaS a factor yet? Is it mainly in small and medium businesses, medium-sized companies?
I will tell you, SaaS is getting a huge foothold in every thing that's emerging, because we can actually act a lot more greenfield in either geographies that have no legacy and you're building it, or in new products that don't need deep back-end integration with the machine, things that our company is taking chances with, because speed and capability that's being built and added, you know, into the back end all the time is just at a much higher premium. And a lot of what we're seeing, at least in today's broad offerings of SaaS that are available, are some really unique things that make us rethink how we do things, especially when we're creating them kind of in a green field, either geography or business. So a lot more than you think. There's a ton of thinking that companies like mine, our size, bigger than ours, are doing about the cloud and about SaaS, about just leveraging really, really strong innovation that's there and just lifting and shifting it inside wherever we can. It's the legacy stuff that's the hard part to decide to unearth.
It is. We're trying to position ourselves to be able to leverage it. And that's a challenge right now because you don't have a lot of extra cycles to spend on the legacy stuff, like you said, Karenann. But where it makes sense and where the stuff is mature, I think we're going to do our best to figure out how to leverage it because we see the same thing as you do around the flexibility, the speed at which you could get to market, that sort of thing. And so, it's another data point to evaluate when you're picking up a design.
And definitely here in the Valley, there are a lot of companies that are trying to be very aggressive about using SaaS. Most of all for their entry level, the entry barrier is so much lower, and you don't have to think about creating your own infrastructure when you're small and growing, and that's a huge advantage, especially for startup companies. So there's a lot of adoption of that here in the area right now. But in reality, I mean, we've been using this for years. I mean, if you think about areas like HR and stock administration and so on, those have been SaaS systems for the last 10, 15 years, and we've all heavily used those.
Payroll, certainly.
Yes, payroll, certainly.
Those were called ASPs.
ASP, before that, time sharing,
Exactly.
go way back. Another extension of SaaS, which some people would just say is a renaming of it, and other people say it's an all-new trend, is we've got to bring up cloud computing. And now there's internal clouds and external clouds and public clouds and private clouds and virtual clouds. Some people would say we're just reinventing. If you take virtualization and a storage area network, now you've got a cloud. So cloud computing, and it's part of your IT strategy. Is it important, but you're trying to create the cloud inside your data center? Or is the cloud, so it's an internal cloud? Or do you view this idea of kind of on-demand capacity, whether it be network or processing or storage, as strategic, as a way of really reinventing your need of capacity or your use of capacity? Why don't we start with you, Matt?
So internally, yeah, this is something we're actively pursuing, creating our own internal cloud, if you will, a grid. And the challenge today, though, is that these proprietary external clouds, at some point have got to figure out if they're going to get a standard or what's it going to be so that we can all kind of, try and meet them halfway. Today, it's, code to this one or you can code to that one, et cetera. And it's a little more complex than it needs to be. So I think they got some maturing to do and maybe some standards to be built out. So that we could leverage it. Most definitely in our, it'd be great at some point where it could be easier for us to consume and pay at the same time. But, going to keep an eye on it. We want to watch it and continue to observe and position ourselves from an application standpoint to be able to leverage it.
I think just like with SaaS on the application side, I think cloud computing definitely offers an ability to experiment and look at, if you're launching new products, if you're launching new technologies, using the cloud and finding out what is the characteristics of this. The problem, though, is that today the management tools are all missing, right? You don't really knows what goes on inside there. And so your ability to actually manage all the things that might be important to you as a user of this are not quite there yet. But I know several examples we did this when I was at Intuit, started to create both internal and external cloud, connect the two to each other so that you could fail or grow into the external cloud once you run out of the capacity internally. And it's definitely technically feasible. The question is, can you rely on it for mission critical applications? And I don't think you can do that yet.
So, my CTO is here with us today. I would be interested in how he'd answer that question. But two things. We already are a big player in managed hosted services, right? We're our infrastructure is out, it's context, it's managed externally and we're kind of happy with how that's working so far. And so when you think about clouds, are they going to build our cloud? If we're going to do a local cloud, are they basically going to say, wow, here's a good idea, let's kind of virtualize all of our assets, and pass that back to you as a cloud? We don't see a lot of thinking going on about that right now. So if we're going to use clouds and your corporate strategy is that context is going to be managed by somebody else, right? IBM, EDS, fill in the blank, whoever you're going to use it. You really have to fundamentally rethink that there's a strategic pillar in your IT strategy that says clouds are going to be core, clouds are going to be context, and if you're in a partnership, like everybody else in the enterprise world, we're trying to reduce the number of partnerships that we manage and only break that rule where we see highly innovative players who are going to really offer us an opportunity and competitive advantage, either do something really fast around the core part of the business. So I think that we still struggle with clouds and how that's going to kind of interop with our philosophy that we've got all of our infrastructural elements sitting in managed services around big contracts. I think that's a struggle, I think, that's still in my mind of how that's going to work.
One of the big local success stories over the last 5 to 10 years is VMware, and that was all in this idea of virtualization. A lot of people would say, well, that was required prior to the whole concept of clouds. For quite a while, people looked at virtualization as appropriate for a development environment or a test environment. I want to spin up a couple extra test instances of that application instead of just having it sit empty. Even if I didn't have any testing going on in that app, we'll virtualize it, but not appropriate for production. So I want to talk about virtualization, and is it mainly in dev and test? Is it moving into production? Are you beginning to look at it as a technology to support disaster recovery? Your disaster recovery site maybe is a bunch of virtualized servers so that you just spin up the capacity that you need. So a related question to clouds, but it really is virtualization ready for prime time or not? And if not ready for prime time, are there some missing technologies or capabilities that need to be developed and delivered where it could be core for production rather than dev and test and more context or less important applications? Start with Matt.
So yeah, it's production. We're using it in quite a few places. In fact, right now we're piloting it, using it in our store back office. So, we better have it monitored and managed and the tool set around it. So it seems we've had to build a little bit of that ourselves, but overall it seems to run. We got good experience with it. It's pretty proven. I mean, I think a lot of people run it, and so it's prime time.
You know what, I think that virtualization, where it's applied, at least in our firm, focuses much more on unpredictable peaking so that you have the ability to just get capacity. Your point about speed of carving out environments in order to do things very fast where you want to bring them up and down has been something that we've done for a while. I think virtualization at the server level is what we're talking about. We are spending a lot of cycles around virtualization on the desktop because we're trying to solve a lot of problems like external collaboration. And people always say, well, what does virtualization on the desktop have to do with external collaboration? Our ability to bring on quickly partners that we can quickly bring into an environment for a set period of time with our level of security and then toss them back out and them want to work with us. And it's not, virtualization on the desktop is not some big financial cost play. It's not, wow, I don't have to buy computers for people. That sounds like a really cool idea. Or I can use a Mac instead of a, PC-based environment. It's much more about doing things very, very quickly and having opportunities and being seen as a organization that you want to collaborate with, that have a set of processes already set up from a technology environment where you can come in and go out. You don't have to burn an image into and give them, and yet we're using and working on all of the same tools. So that's more of an interesting focus for us on virtualization as opposed to the server environment.
Yeah, I think that a lot of CIOs became heroes a few years back by just doing server virtualization, saving a lot of resources and so on. I really think that it's moved on to the agility, the focus on the agility, and exactly what you were talking about, that the ability to spin up a new engineering workstation in a matter of minutes instead of weeks makes a huge difference. And also to be able to, like you were saying, to snapshot a whole bunch of different environments and really very fast be able to cycle back and forth between different environments and create them in different situations, both internal and external to the company.
So you've brought up the desktop, and the big player in the desktop, number one, for many, many years is Microsoft. They had a big trip in the last couple of years with Vista pretty much being shunned by enterprises that demanded that they keep XP Pro supported, and we'll see if Windows 7 corrects for that misstep. Still very strong in areas like Exchange and Outlook, but now Sun with OpenOffice becomes part of Oracle. Oracle and Microsoft aren't exactly friends, so anything Oracle could do to continue challenging Microsoft, they really will. Do you see a day where either through because of virtualization of the desktop, or because of open source, or because they're just getting too slow and not meeting our needs, or we don't like having such a powerful vendor, they charge too much? Is Microsoft's influence on the increase? Is it flat, or is it going down? They're not a sponsor here tonight, I don't think, so that's, you can ask that directly. They are, sorry. So where does that fit in from a large enterprise perspective? It's been a big part of the budget. It's a big line item. It's in front of everybody's face. How do they fit?
You know what? If Microsoft's marketing actually starts to come in through the solutioning that they're doing, they're not going to have to worry about whether we pick this thing of theirs or that thing. They are getting a huge mind share. Whether it actually translates into market share, I think we'll know in the next 5 or 10 years. But a huge mind share of collaboration. I was talking to some colleagues from Cisco on, collaboration is the Cisco story. Collaboration is the Google story. But in enterprises, they are really starting to overtake a lot of the mind share of conversations about how you do collaboration kind of end to end. And Exchange then just becomes a component that has to be plugged in. And luckily you can say yes, no to Vista because it is not integral to make a decision like that. But between what they're doing with SharePoint, some of the moves that they're making in some of the new product areas that they're moving into, and certainly their kind of MS Online story of I don't know, it's going to be collaboration from the cloud or what happens. But I think Microsoft's influence probably will start to, rise from a product level sales. I'm selling you Office, I'm selling you this, I'm selling you that, where you make a set of different decisions. My own opinion is that's what seems to be happening with Microsoft. They're moving on to a end-to-end solution company and away from kind of that product thinking. That's the marketing. We'll see how it actually turns out.
Yeah, and the stuff in the cloud that they're doing, I think, is going to be great when it comes out. Office in the cloud, the whole hosting stuff. We spend a lot of time and money on dealing with desktops and dealing with the Exchange environment, et cetera. That being in the cloud, just something that just kind of goes away. We don't have to worry about that anymore. Is going to be great.
I think Office as a product will probably be with us for a long time because it sort of is the gold standard for the interchange format of what all the documents we exchange with each other. But I do see a lot of things in the collaboration space where people are putting together suites of other products that doesn't necessarily depend on the Microsoft backbone in order to, or the Cisco backbone in order to work. And I think, especially here in the Valley, there's definitely a lot of companies that are coming up with competing products in a number of different niches.
So if you take the confluence of cloud computing, software as a service, and collaboration, you're talking Web 2.0. And you've got a lot of younger employees that for many, many years have been on Facebook or MySpace. Maybe we're more of the LinkedIn type. Twitter is a watchword. And many, I guess all those companies with the exception of MySpace are local Silicon Valley companies. Is consumer, is it going to make the transition to business? Is there going to be a set of tools that, if you think about, for example, understanding what skill set every employee has, knowledge management, it's never been done successfully in companies. It's been a category, it's been a failed category. There may be more information about what your employee's expertise is in LinkedIn than in your HR system. And yet their subscription to LinkedIn, they own. It wasn't something you bought, and when they leave, that information goes with them. And they be more, and they're collaborating via IM more than chat, more than they are via email. So Web 2.0 in the large enterprise, is it going to be a separate set of products delivered by a separate set of company that build enterprise versions of those products? Are you going to allow, eventually embrace, and even start developing APIs into those tool sets that many of your employees certainly use at home or probably using at work as well? Get into a discussion about Web 2.0 and a large enterprise.
So I think it's a reality. I mean, we had the same problem with the instant messenger 10, 15 years ago. And most companies, some companies blocked it, and some realized they had to live with it. And this blurring of what is the identity of the individual, is it on behalf of the enterprise or is it as an individual, is something that we need to figure out how to do. Because I do think that, as you say, that people live on Facebook, they live on LinkedIn, they live on a number of these tools, and they are becoming de facto business tools in a lot of cases. So we've got to find out, what role does it play? Do we actually own the identity of the individual when they use this, and can we manage that on behalf of the enterprise? And I am seeing, I mean, it's sort of the bane of software as a service, right? You've got to control the identity management on the front end and the consolidation of information on the back end, and those problems have not been really solved yet.
Good point. You know, I tell you that depends on the kind of associate base that you have employed by the company, and you know, in retail, it's a little different than if you're in an office environment. So, you know, you really want the folks dealing with the customer in the store and less in front of a terminal or a device, and engaging the customer, those sorts of things, helping them with problems. Now, there is a place, obviously, for those sorts of things with dealing with talking to our customers and how they want to be talked to and, you know, spoken to, whether it be through Twitter or through some of the other social sites around how to do a project for their house or a remodel, and maybe having, you know, some groups that allow people to collaborate on a project or those sorts of things. And we're thinking about how those things could play and how we connect with our customers, probably more so than with our associates. In some ways, we got a pilot right now going on with some social media, some social interaction things that we're doing, and that seems to be going real well. But it's going to be kind of developing as we go. And if you think about how you deal with a pro customer or the contractor versus the do-it-yourself person or the person that really is coming in for other things, advice, etc. You know, very different in a lot of ways. And so, you know, that kind of media will help us connect with those customers in the way that they want to be connected to.
You know, we spend a lot of time as CIOs and IT community and technologists talking about the technology aspect of the Web 2.0. And in the enterprises, there's this huge fear. I see so many young people here that fewer kids are coming out with engineering degrees and computer science, and we have an aging population, and one day, you know, my son is going to kind of take over the world that we're in, and he's not going to want to work for us because we don't have Facebook. He probably, you know, wants to eat and pay for his apartment, so the fact that I don't have Facebook, he doesn't say, you know, I'm going to work for Google. There's only so many Google jobs in the world.
Fewer and fewer.
Yeah, fewer and fewer. And so I think this kind of internal, we're going to have to do this because it's a younger and younger demo that's going to come in and work, has been a lot of the focus that we've had probably for the last couple years, overly, you know, this coming shortage. The economic crisis has thrown so many IT people onto the street, it's a little further off than we thought. I think more and more the Web 2.0 becomes, how does the collaboration elements that are being built actually enable the business model that you're working on? So we have fewer and fewer salespeople, for instance, with experience in the field that are there. How do they get the information that they need to as quickly as possible? That's like an actual problem that's being solved. And they all carry phones around. I can tell you there isn't one of our sales force that's thinking to themselves, Twitter. I think that if they're thinking that, they're not thinking that the way we are all thinking it in the room here. But I can tell you, you know, 10 or 15 years ago, none of them were thinking that they were going to do their banking at an ATM and never see a banker either. So I think that they sort of are progressing. I was thinking it was a generational thing with collaboration, and it's not. It's really business. It's really business related. My own personal opinion, Pete, it's the companies that figure out how to build collaborative fabrics which meet the culture of the company exactly where it is, because big companies like Baxter have a way. We have a scientific collaboration vibe going on. In the auto industry, it was a different type of you know, innovative design and operational excellence vibe. But if you can build something that actually then starts to dip into and meet the culture and solve the problems, it's going to like really mean competitive advantage for the company. It's not just going to be improved productivity and those types of things. I think people, yeah, I'm still looking for the Silicon Valley startup that's figured out how to do time shifting, because I got my money ready to do that one. But short of time shifting, we have our bioscience organization in Asia, Eastern Europe, and California. And all of that, they're basically doing parts of the same problem. And knowledge management aside, when we bring them all together in a multi-million-dollar research conference, magic happens for those 5 days. And if collaboration could make magic happen day 6 through 265, it pays the freight for everything that we're ever going to build on collaboration. So it's not that they have to collaborate. It has to take the real world bringing together and keeping things going, because that will mean real competitive advantage for the company. And that is a place where I think there are going to be a lot of innovative pieces that plug in. Because as much mind share as a Microsoft may have, there are incredibly interesting small ideas that are really important to my company that Microsoft couldn't be bothered commercializing, that's going to really plug in. The key is, don't build it on some weirdo thing. Kind of pick the standards, focus on the innovation, and then it plugs in, and it's, you know, magic in biotech, or it's magic in financial services or something. I think that the Web 2.0 is you know, going to be the way they it's building this environment that the business just takes off on, for sure, in my company, for sure.
Good.
one comment we talked at the table about that the kids have figured this out. They play World of Warcraft, and they actually have figured out how to work together in teams across the world, people that hardly speak the same language. Common goal, roles, division of roles and responsibilities, and they achieve great things within that universe. So you translate that concept, and you can continue to do the magic in the enterprise.
World of Warcraft for the enterprise, project management. What an idea. We're going to open it up to audience Q&A. So if you could raise your hand, there's at least 2 mics, and give your name and who you're with, and then direct the question.
Thank you. Robert Mullins, I'm with Examiner.com. And my question is about security for mobile devices in your enterprises. The computing is becoming increasingly mobile. More laptops are sold than desktops, that kind of thing. And field employees are constantly using smartphones or iPhones or PDAs and other portable devices. And I wonder what your security approach is to managing those portable devices that your employees use for your enterprise, and also what pressures there may be on you from state regulations. Massachusetts, for instance, is enacting a law that takes effect next January requiring encryption on devices to protect your corporate data and customer data. And I wondered if the panel could address those issues.
Well, you're the most regulated company here, and so
It is,
encryption and that kind of thing is
definitely.
pretty important. Why don't we start with you?
So we, and this is a place where, you know, there's going to be a few young heads in the room that go, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. We really don't allow any device to come in and access our infrastructure. We specify devices that will be used and controlled. And it's not just because of things like Massachusetts. It has a lot to do with intellectual property. In a mobile environment where you're moving people around, I mean, they could be carrying around a piece of compound information that, you know, cures Alzheimer's. And, you know, not right away, it's, but definitely, there's 2 things that we always say about the mobile devices that we put in place. It's either got to be encrypted or it's got to have a kill switch. And if it doesn't have one or the other, it doesn't make it. It doesn't make it. And so I hear constantly, we ran a, now all of you won't be able to believe this because you're from California, we ran a pilot with iPhone, because I just literally couldn't stand it anymore about how iPhone is so much better than the standard that we had selected, and how I'm out of touch and everything. And so we had about 80 of them, and we had over 80% of them turned back in by the end of the 2nd week, because we are a email and same time and instant messaging culture. And cracks of time and the use of the device for the interactivity of that meant we need to have a really strong interface at a QWERTY keyboard.
Yeah.
So guess what we use?
Canadian.
Yeah. It's a Canadian company. But so has to have a kill switch or it has to be encrypted, and we just, those are 2 strong things. It limits innovation and freedom, but.
Anything to add?
The one kind of wild idea I came up with was we opened up Wi-Fi in our office, just free public Wi-Fi, so that our suppliers could come in and work pretty easily. So we were used to having to issue them a user ID and password for the day, et cetera. I'm like, this is crazy. Let's just take it down and have a different segment, but just let them go knock themselves out. And that seems to have been working real well, because a lot of people carry smartphones, and it's kind of sped things up, and I've started looking at some of the usage statistics, and it's being embraced pretty well. So it's something that we've tried in our offices. I haven't done it in our stores yet, but I may try it soon.
So one more comment that I see a number of companies that go multi-platform, and that raises the need for sort of single kill switch across platforms and so on. And there are companies now that are actually starting to manage this so that you actually have much more real-time management of not just the security side of it, but also your calling plans and so on, so that you actually have much tighter management of the mobile devices.
Good. Somebody had a mic, I think, right there. Great.
So my name is Ismail Rahman. I'm with KPMG. I have a follow-up question to the endpoint security for data leak that the gentleman asked. So there's like two-part. I think there was recently a breach where someone hijacked a lot of healthcare information, and they're asking for like a $10 million ransom. So the first question is, like, you know, if you were that company who had lost that data, would you pay the ransom? And secondly, you know, we talked about endpoint security, but I also wanted to know if general data leak, like, you know, confidential corporate communication, intellectual property, product information, is that a concern for you? You know, leakage of that information in this market, a concern?
So I think privacy of information about your health is a regulated issue. It's called HIPAA. And so if somebody had hijacked information that we had about our patients, we'd get a phone call before we could pay the ransom, because it's one of those things that, of course, none of you want. This is the big debate right now along electronic healthcare records, is what's the security of a place where they're going to put all your test results from the time, you know, that they enacted until the end of time together. Who's going to take care of it? You know, is it going to go in the health vault?
Cloud.
The cloud. It's going to go in the health cloud.
Amazon S3.
The health cloud, and
tell.
it'll be federated, and what kind of security will be in the health cloud. So I think that information that is regulated, like social security numbers and credit cards and healthcare information, those things have highly reputational impact for any company that loses a laptop. I mean, you can just think of, what was the name of the financial company that lost all the credit cards and just about went out of business? I can't think of it.
Heartland or?
What was it?
Choice Point.
Yes, Choice Point. And I mean, just about destroyed, well, probably has now, destroyed the company. It becomes highly reputational. The other piece of highly confidential intellectual property, et cetera, becomes business model disruptive, which is somebody can do it to you and it won't appear in the paper. And, you know, I think both are equally. One becomes reputational to the brand of the company of keeping secure those types of things. And the special oversight that IT people have to have these days about privacy. A lot of companies have chief privacy officers. Some of those are affiliated up through the legal organization. Some come up through IT. My security staff and the privacy element have a really, really strong partnership in the healthcare companies. So we wouldn't pay the ransom. We wouldn't pay the ransom because that would probably be a bigger PR nightmare. But also, we would hope that the strongest security that we have around patient data, social security number, employee data is even a level of security that we are that comfortable with that it couldn't be stolen.
But also, this is not just a problem for the individual enterprise. I mean, at Yahoo, the FBI gets involved in all these cases immediately, and they really do most of the work in terms of the forensics and who's involved and so on. So it's not just the decision of an individual company how to handle it.
Over here? There.
Sorry. Oh, yeah. Hi, Donald Klein. I'm from Modius, a software vendor here in the Valley. Given that the fashion of the Valley right now is to go green, I'm wondering to what extent energy consumption is a CIO issue, how much visibility you have on energy consumption across your enterprise, and what you're doing to reduce it, if indeed you're trying to reduce it, from the CIO's office.
I can tell you, I'm talking to a lot of companies here in the Valley that care deeply about this, and there's a lot of emphasis on understanding what is your energy profile, what is your carbon footprint, however you want to measure it, and what are the kind of things that you can do to minimize that. I've actually seen in the last 5 years a complete revolution in the way that data centers are built and managed, and energy consumption, the overhead inside the data center has fallen by 80 to 90% just in a 5-year period. I'm sure you can see the same thing in the office environment. I mean, most companies have vastly more endpoint by the end user endpoints that they have servers, and because of that, managing that is an equally big challenge, and there's an equally big focus on that now. A lot of startup companies focusing on this particular area, and a lot of tools coming out.
Because of the size of our footprint, obviously that's a big focus for us, not only from a standpoint of doing the right thing, but also a cost play for us, and it's getting some investment in a lot of ways to refresh some of the assets that are maybe not as efficient as they should be, or as the newest models are, and we're focused on it in a pretty healthy way at Home Depot. And at eBay as well, we were focused on it.
Is it on your desk yet, Karenann?
You know what? Yeah, but it comes to my desk not as green IT. Nobody had to say the word green IT because sustainability is tattooed in big, huge letters across the corporate culture and the values of the company. And sustainability, at least at Baxter, has multiple components. It's the sustainability of the company for the future, for patient innovation, shareholder value, all of those types of things. The environmental element is strictly one of them. I would tell you the green IT in our company takes on much more of a paper usage, paper printing. How much is that? Because people can really viscerally, kind of come in contact with, I've just killed a tree, here's a tree that I'm carrying around. And so it focuses on much more on the user community. Again, we're a managed service, we're outsourced. I can tell you the selection of the support services that we have kind of A bucket things, cost being the most important, just in case my finance guy's watching. Cost being an important component, but the sustainability aspect of the partners that we have strongly around, do they monitor, do they measure, do they have targets for reduction, because we think it's going to translate into cost reduction, but because you can't be seen as putting your environmental agenda into the hands of somebody that doesn't have the same core values. So it was in the A bucket of decisions around the partnerships that we did for all of our big outsourcing deals.
Okay, top criteria then. Right here.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up, Lilia Sherman with the Sherman Group. I wanted to follow up on the question about collaboration. We talked about it inside the enterprise. And I'm wondering if you're looking in the future to how it influences collaboration outside the enterprise with customers or partners. And I don't mean, Twitter and LinkedIn. I'm talking about more systematic changes in a more interactive web presence or wikis to collaborate with partners. Are you looking at technologies like that in the future?
Yeah, we actually, because we don't interact with customers, our customers are patients, and they really, they're searching out information. Our emphasis when we think about collaboration is really around partners who are helping us with the invent cycle. So whether it's, the equivalent in biotech of, 3 guys in a garage at Stanford are, 6 scientists working in a pod at the Mayo Clinic or out at Kettering or something like that. And they don't necessarily, with smaller, more innovative organizations externally, come into it with, here's how we want to collaborate. What they want to know is how they take what they've got and what you've got and put it together. And if you're the easiest one to interact and interoperate with, and you make it no hassle for them, which is just kind of look at us this way, Right now, to them, that's the equivalent of their, one button buy. They can just one step do it, which they don't have to think about. They don't have to install this and do that. They just, want to know how do you want to collaborate with us, and it's an ongoing element from the external. I will tell you, it's not different with external collaboration than it is with what we're trying to do with the internal community. It's because by the time you get in different geographies, whether an external partner is there, they may have a different culture, but if they really have decided, I want to work with you, they've already said kind of we're going to collaborate. So it's maybe a little bit different in the how you do it, but it feels like the same. It feels like the same internal one.
So for us, collaborative forecasting and planning is obviously important between us and our suppliers, and that will be enabled by a lot of the collaboration tools that are on the market today. The other thing that we're trying to figure out and haven't quite figured it out yet is how we should collaborate with our customers and how they want to be collaborated with, because in a lot of cases you could put something out there that never gets used. So we want to have something that they can collaborate on know-how or that sort of thing, and really provide value. And finding out what they want is really the most important thing right now.
IBM has some great case studies on this, where they actually started a number of skunk works internally, and then started using that to tie the company together globally, and then eventually reached out to both suppliers and customers and have them use the same collaboration tools. So there are lots of examples of that.
Right here in the middle? Or we have one over there? Okay.
Hi, my name is Ravi Katad. I'm with Mocha 5. We're actually a desktop virtualization company. I actually have a question for the panel, but for Karenann specifically. You had mentioned that you look for innovation that brings competitive advantage and opportunities. I'm sure that's near and dear to a lot of people in here because we're innovative companies, but all the times it's also small companies, startups, and oftentimes the gatekeepers at your organizations would rather do business with a big company or bring in a big company. What's the right level, or what's the right message in terms of helping understand the risk-reward of the innovative but perhaps small company versus the big company?
You know what, and I think one of the questions where I thought you were going to go is, how do you actually get through, the pit bulls at the security desk? Is that what you meant? Okay. Because I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be you trying to get to me. And there's two pieces of advice that I will tell you actually work. One is, there are places where big CIOs who are known for embracing innovation, and I'm telling you, you do not have to Google below the fold to know who those people are. You can just really figure out. That's how, when I became a CIO, I had not worked in IT before. I wanted to hang around with real smart people who were doing really smart things, and it's very easy to find out who those people are, whether you're in the industry or not. They all hang around and go places, and they're going places looking for small companies that fit very nicely into a portfolio, or they're sending people to those places. And whether it be conferences where they are scouring for things, or whether they are at speaking engagements where you can go and do it. But pick the right ones, because present company accepted, there are a lot of blockhead CIOs in the world. Because they're so busy with their legacy, which is 85 to 90% of what their job is, that the 10% that they've got, they're not looking for you.
The only thing I would add was the way you don't get in is filling up my inbox with email. That's not how you get in. But
the other way that I will tell you that I have seen very effectively done is know enough about my company that you can figure out how that is going to work in my company. Yeah. Because the cold call is sometimes can't even get past the spam filter.
Yeah.
but somebody who says, I think this is how it's going to work for Baxter. It's not that hard to do just that piece. And you know, I guess the third one is the really unique marketing pitches. You know, I'm a sucker for them myself, which is I see some piece of collateral come in, or they get in through, you know, the darndest ways. That's a very unique marketing approach. It doesn't have to be slick, by the way. It just has to be creative. If you're innovative, you know, just focus one day on an innovative marketing opportunity. Pete, you're probably teaching them all the time. Kids, you need to do this.
Yeah,
but
probably,
that is, and it really does work that way. I can think off the top of my head of 4 or 5 things that we're doing with, you know, 3 guys in a garage in Stanford type of things, which really fit what we are trying to do. We have a big business unit headquarter down in Los Angeles, down in Westlake Village, and there's some very, very innovative and unique things that are going in. Not as a standalone, they're actually getting plugged in. We'll take the trouble to integrate it if it looks like it really has a unique capability. And but if you really want to get through the din, you know, it's not hard to figure out what we're doing and how that's going to fit.
Yeah, and in retail, there's probably two conferences that really matter in technology. You know, Retail Systems and some of the other things where all the retailers are there looking for technology. And that's when you kind of get they invest the time to go through the booths, et cetera. So, you know, that's important. And I agree with Karenann. I mean, you know, if you can't articulate how it's going to solve a problem that I have, I'm not interested in looking at technology for technology's sake. And it's important that you invest the time to understand my business, so then you have credibility when you do get the time or the venue to be able to give us the pitch.
Right here in the middle.
My name is Henny Solomon with Microsoft. Thank you very much for your time. I'm and the earlier comments too.
He takes all that back.
Yeah. No, actually, my question is beyond the current stage we are in now with economic reset. If you look 2010 and beyond, I would like to better understand your priorities. What are you going to be focusing on? I believe we had a little bit of a grace period because of the baby boomers expected to retire, are actually staying longer in the workforce because of a variety of reasons. I think there is a new workforce coming into play. What is your vision in 2010 and beyond? That's number one. Maybe a follow-up question. What kind of innovations would you expect to see coming your way? Thank you.
Matt, why don't you start?
Let me get my crystal ball out here a second. No, I'm just, you know, it really depends on what the complexion is of the workforce that you're dealing with. So at Home Depot, we have a lot of long tenured associates. And in a lot of cases, you know, in the past, we had not really brought in a lot of college students to kind of come in on the ground floor. And so we've kind of started that back up. And we have a goal, kind of internal goal, of trying to get 20% of any new hires that we have coming from college grads. So it's an important thing for us from a recruiting standpoint. And right now, there's plenty of them to choose from. You can imagine. And so, you know, having a strong intern program, you know, Karenann and I were talking about this just a few minutes ago. Really important to do that. Being on campus, invest in your time, teaching some classes or speaking at some classes are important. From my perspective, for my direct reports to be successful, they've got to go spend time. And they can pick a school or a couple schools, but they got to do it. And it's important that we go invest, but also understand career pathing as we go along. And it's really on an individual basis. I got folks who, you know, don't want to do anything but do what they're doing today and for a very, very long time. So there's not some magic time timer that's going to pop that says, oh, all these guys are going to be leaving me. It's important to stay in touch with them. It's important to make sure that they're inspired, that they enjoy what they're working on, and that they're engaged in the business and they see the impact that they're making every day in our stores and in our business unit. And being seen and viewed as an equal to their business partner as opposed to being subservient is very important as well. And so, you know, you earn that every day at the Home Depot, and you protect it because it's an important thing for you to not only be able to get things done, but also from a standpoint of making an impact. So, you know, as far as workforce is concerned, as long as you plant the right seeds and are cultivating the right values, I think, you know, you'll be okay. And I think for the most part, the scare of, you know, not having people in, I'm with Karenann on this one. I mean, I just don't see that. I really don't see that. And so, you know, it's going to be important that we make sure we don't have another Y2K shortage facade out there in the industry that helps us kind of all run up the salaries of everybody that's actually on the payroll today. So, you know, managing that appropriately is important.
2010 and beyond, Lars.
So I think that what we're seeing right now with this sort of almost exaggerated cost control and finding out how to run IT with less and so on, combined with the fact that many companies are now really serious about sustainability, I think there's a class of tools that are going to be really important as we go forward. We already talked about collaboration. That's definitely one. We talked about data centers, building different data centers differently. And already in the last 5-6 years, we've seen servers that it's totally, how you construct a server these days is totally different about how you did it just 5-6 years ago. Much more emphasis on using less power, less energy in general. So I do think that there's going to be much more emphasis on that. I think collaboration as such is going to be very important, as much from a sustainability point of view, eliminating travel and just eliminating excessive use of energy, as much as increasing the richness of the collaboration. So I think that and there's a lot of startup companies focusing on that right now, as well as what's coming out of Microsoft and Cisco and so on.
So we've heard workforce, sustainability.
You know, I think I go kind of a different direction. In 2010, I think there's going to be a lot of big companies that are thinking about what's happening with Obama taxing all of this stuff outside of the country, because that's going to be a huge business driver. And I've got a big group of people in India, and I'm going to be thinking about that. And I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities around innovation, not necessarily on cost cutting, but thinking about bringing that thing back and keeping the same financials associated with it. And I don't think that we have done any thinking about what happens if we have to bring work back in order to either stay off the target list or in order to look at it. Because those are, you know, you change tax rates in big companies, and that is a huge driver. You can take my budget to 0 versus changing the tax rate a few points, in a $100 billion company. So I think, you know, that's going to be one thing that we're thinking about an awful lot.
Onshoring.
How to look. It's going to be called right shoring, I believe.
Right shoring, okay.
So I think that we're going to be thinking about that, because I think that is not going to go away. I listened to Vinton Cerf talk a few months back about clouds, and this is a brilliant guy. He's really quite old now, but his mind is still in 1976 in a good way. And he made a really interesting comment which made me think. And he said in the early days of the internet, it was really a bunch of different internets. They were all kind of out there on their own, and then there were a unifying factor that brought 70 different networks into a single worldwide internet. And his theory was that that's what's going to happen with clouds. That there's this cloud, and there's this cloud, and you've got your local cloud, and you've got your managed service cloud, and all these things. And he believes strongly that there's going to be innovation soon to unify clouds. And what are the business models that are going to come out of unified clouds where, instead of you trying to figure out how to get this from here to there, it basically is already set up. And I think beyond 2010, at least my company is going to be thinking about that, because we're going to be leveraging services that we don't want to do for ourselves, or we don't want to have somebody do for us. We want to just go and get those types of things. And I think we'll be thinking a lot about what's going to come about with all these clouds. Because it won't stay the way it is right now, where Amazon's cloud and what's Microsoft's called Azure, and it's not going to stay like that. It's there's too many identity issues associated with the services that are in those clouds for it not to kind of come together. I think that's going to get here a lot sooner because it's going to give us a lot of fun things to invest in and a lot of fun places to put things. And no longer will it be about some on-premise thing. So I don't think infrastructure is going to be free. I think you're just going to pay for the service instead of the infrastructure piece.
Good thought. I think we're wrapped up for questions in the audience, and time to close the session off.
I think on behalf of all of us here, I'd like to thank Pete and Matt and Lars and Karenann for being here. Let's give them a hand. And now comes the ceremonial presentation of the thank you T-shirt. And I'd especially like to thank SAS again for their generous sponsorship, and thanks to all of you for coming. I look forward to seeing you very soon at the Churchill Club. Good night.